College students slash graduates of Reddit, what's the craziest thing you ever witnessed in your dorm slash residence hall? NSFW. Lived in a 21-floor tower. Something like 1,600 students lived in it. 4 guys decided to have a jam session in an elevator and go up and down the building. Had drums, guitar, saxophone, and vocalist. I think every single floor wanted to murder them. I had some friends cut down a Christmas tree from campus somewhere and put it up in their dorm room. The only thing is, real Christmas trees are not allowed because they are a crazy fire hazard. They bought one of those things you would put a live plant in, a planter, some 90-degree brackets, and some screws, and screwed the tree down. Then they built a false top and sprinkled dirt and rocks, again taken from campus, on it to make it look like the tree was planted in dirt. They convinced our RA that they had an uncle who had a tree farm and allowed them to dig up a real tree to use for the year. My absolute favorite part is that they returned the saw they used to warm it. I was an RA. I had 8 residents trap a raccoon and bring it into their dorm to domesticate it. Guess what happens when you let a raccoon in the dorm? It up. 2 things, same dude. We had a guy whose room was at the end of the hall, so it had a little extra space next to his door. A little alcove. We had tour groups come through our dorm with prospective students and their families. Well, on one of those days he tore out a bunch of pics from his Playboys and posted them all over his door and on the walls outside his room. He took 3 chairs from the common room and put them outside his room as well. He then had a sign that said, "The End Hose Waiting Room." A mother went absolutely ballistic when she saw that. He got into deep for it too. A few months later, when another tour group came through, our RA Bill, who was a total hole, was giving kind of a speech to the high schoolers and their families. So our buddy fell out of his room in just his boxers and his hands tied behind his back with a sock in his mouth. He spit the sock out and started yelling, "Bill, untie me. This isn't funny." Our RA was humiliated. The parents went absolutely nuts over it. Our buddy was kicked out later that day. My dorm had a secret Santa thing, where your Santa would give you a task to do, and if you completed it, you'd get a gift. In the packed dining hall one night shortly before Christmas break, a huge, hairy, completely naked man jumps onto a table, tucks his junk between his legs, and screams, "Daddy only likes me when I'm a little girl." My roommate was his Santa, and as a reward for completing the task, she gave him a teddy bear wearing overalls. One guy peed on a cookie sheet and let it freeze outside in winter. He took said frozen sheet of pee and slid it under another guy's door when he wasn't there. All the rooms in that dorm were carpeted. One of my friend's girlfriends had a roommate that would masturbate almost every night. She said it sounded like someone vigorously stirring macaroni. I remember this story every time I cook macaroni. A guy that was wasted and tripping balls went into the wrong room in the middle of the night and was thrown out of said room, across the hall, and through the wall into my old room. Turns out there had been a giant hole there that was cheaply patched up years ago. Otherwise there should have been no way he could have gone straight through the wall. It was a cold night, but my roommate and I pushed his dresser up to attempt to cover the hole until someone could fix it. Good times. Guy down the hall was just nasty. Smelled bad, slovenly, but very friendly. He never went to class. You might be thinking gamer, but nope, he was a day trader. Always told us about his wins/losses for that day. Anyway, this was before mobile devices, and he hardly ever left his computer as a result. Traded in movements of pennies. So he had milk jugs to pee in. He told us proudly about how much time he saved by peeing in milk jugs. I presumed he'd dump them out routinely, but the first time I caught sight of his room I learned the truth. It was as messy as you'd imagine, but then I saw the jugs all over his room. The floor, windowsill, computer desk. My memory is hazy by now, but I'd say he had at least 20 1-gallon milk jugs full of piss in his room. To be fair, I couldn't verify that they were all actually full or just waiting in reserve, but at a glance at least some of them were clearly topped off. And honestly, how many gallons of piss is really acceptable to keep in your room? Walked into the shared kitchen to make an easy mac. Upon entering, I see this drunk chick sitting on the edge of a table with a drunk dude standing in front of her. They were talking, but I was way too focused on getting my easy mac on, so I didn't think much of it. I put my wet Mac in the microwave and set it for 3.5 minutes before strolling back to my dorm. Ding. So I roll back to the kitchen to get my Mac and sure enough, there King. Her skirt was pulled up, her pink thong was dangling from one of her ankles, and her legs were wrapped around his waist. Now this guy wasn't thrusting like he is trying to start a fire down there, but based on the sounds this girl was making, he was giving her exactly what she wanted. I did what any sane man would do. I got my Mac, removed the lid, gave it a good stir, and checked for hard noodles. Once the quality control was finished, I casually walked down the hall to my friend's room and told him that someone destroyed all of the furniture in the kitchen. He of course wanted to check it out for himself, so as he was walking to the kitchen, I got ready for a great reaction. As he gets to the door, he turns and looks in and says does nothing. He just stares for a solid 15 seconds. I was starting to think they had stopped. Then he gave the classic, what the shout, and turns with an expression of confusion and satisfaction. My work was done. To this day, that was the most satisfying easy Mac I've ever had. One day I woke up to a sink sitting in the hallway. Like a sink that is built into a countertop or something. Someone must have just stripped a sink out of a countertop from a different building and put it in the hallway on the 4th floor. I was a sophomore at University of Iowa on the engineering dorm. The problem was that the main cafeteria of the campus was downstairs, so drunk people would get confused and wander to it, even though it was closed, then start having fun on other floors. It was Saturday night and pretty miserable outside, so most people were staying in, when we heard a scream, then a loud crack. When we checked on it, there was nobody in the hallway. There was, however, a large smear of blood along the wall, and the exit sign was broken. One of the guys decided to investigate, and found a huge guy in the bathroom, bleeding from the face and drunk. Turns out he had the brilliant idea of running down the hallway, leaping into the air, and headbutting the exit sign. One time, my roommate and I hatched quails in our dorm room. We started out with growing plants, then breeding better fish, and from there we kind of escalated to birds. Ordered a cheap incubator and the eggs online, and kept it in the corner of our room without having any real hope that any of them would hatch. 3 of them did, somehow, and they lived in our dorm room for a whole year without the aura finding out helps that they only grow to be about 3 inches tall. One naked drunk dude jumped through 1st floor window, as in broke the window with his bare skin. A bunch of guys in my hall collected some masks and dangerous looking items, pocket knives mostly. I think someone had a saw for some reason, and pretended to have tied a dude to a chair with a bag over his head, ketchup for fake blood and everything. They spent half the night on chat roulette with a sign that said or he dies. They didn't actually get any, but people's reactions were pretty great. That and the time, one of the engineers dented a wall by firing a custom Nerf gun he'd built down the length of the hall are my only really crazy stories. One of the RAs got fired, I can't remember why. He had a week to move out of his dorm room, and it coincided with Mother's Weekend. Lots of moms visiting campus. He decided to get a keg and invite a bunch of people over as a U to his bosses. His room was larger than most, since he was an RA. When they broke up the party, the people stumbling out were frat brothers and drunk moms, and a couple of grandmothers. Difficult to choose between these two. First, 2 guys on the dorm floor got into an argument at an off-campus party. One, let's say John, goes back to his room to sleep it off. The other, let's say Bill, brings 4 friends with him, and kicks in John's door. As they rush in to beat up John, John grabs a pair of scissors and stabs one in the gut and one in the arm. Bill and friends do not succeed in beating up John. John was later expelled after he decided to drunkenly light artillery shell fireworks off in the upper stairwell of the dorm. Second, it was 5 AM on a Sunday morning and my friends and I had been up all night. We are walking down the hall to our rooms and past the communal bathroom. We hear an odd hissing / splattering noise, so we walk in to check it out. It turns out a drunk hole had repeatedly kicked the pipe connecting the toilet to the wall, detached it from the wall, and ran. Water shooting out of the wall at fire hydrant strength was making the hissing noise, and it hitting the wall 8 feet away through the open stall door was making the splattering noise. We reported it as quick as we could, but it being the crack of dawn on a Sunday, no maintenance workers were around, so the water continued spraying for like an hour. On the 8th floor of a dorm, ended up flooding the 6th, 7th, and 8th floors, and created an 8-story waterfall. When it reached the stairwell, water in the basement laundry area ended up being knee deep. Druggy guy down the hall had his druggy girlfriend come visit. Druggy girlfriend ODs in the handicapped bathroom very early the next morning and dies. Edit. More details then. This guy that lived in room 4214 named Ron had a reputation of selling pills out of his room, anti-depression and anxiety type. Near the end of the semester, his girlfriend comes, and they have a small party in his room with some other people. The patrolling RA bought pills from him from time to time, so he didn't give them. Smash cut to 6 AM the next morning. Nearly the entire floor wakes up to Ron screaming, and paramedics trying to revive his girl. No dice. She had taken a lot of Klonopin, drank a lot of vodka, apparently got sleepy and tapped out. The cops searched his room, arrested him, he got expelled, and he was never heard from again. His roommate then got a single and almost burned the building down trying to make mac and cheese on a camp stove in his room a few weeks later. King bonkers. I lived on the 5th floor of monstrous 6-story building. One night in February, the fire alarms went off at like 2 AM and the building was evacuated. No fire, no nothing. We all went back inside. The next Tuesday, the alarms went off at the same time. This time someone had taken out the fire extinguishers and thrown them from the top of the stairwells where they exploded when reaching the ground. Obviously, you can't use elevators in a fire situation and the stairwells were a disaster. It wasn't so much fun running through that. This type of thing then happened every Tuesday night for at least a month. They eventually caught the people when they tried to hit 2 dorms back to back. My roommate, a girl who lived across the hall, we will call her Sarah, and myself were sitting in the common room, which is situated right between the 2 dorm rooms, studying/chatting together. We were talking about place we'd traveled or something when the other girl's roommate comes down the stairs wrapped in a towel, presumably from having taken a shower, and into the common room. As she's walking toward the room, she casually says, "Hey Sarah, I'm going to bed now." Sarah says okay, and continues the conversation she was having with my roommate and I. Her roommate stops in her tracks and repeats, "I'm going to bed now." Sarah gets an embarrassed look on her face, gets up, and silently follows her roommate into the room and shuts the door. The slip and slide we had on the ground floor was pretty epic, but probably not as epic as this one girl. For some reason she decided to 12 guys on her floor and turn the peephole backwards. Reverse peephole scene full style for everyone to see. I'm fairly confident she didn't graduate. Pull up a chair, it's story time. Across the hall from me lived Ron and Todd, not their real names, but who cares. They were not a good match. Ron was basically a fat hippie, and Todd was on the football team. The funny thing about was that it was Todd who drove Ron crazy, not the other way around. Todd basically didn't care about Ron's antics, but Ron couldn't stand sharing his dorm room with a straight edge. So after a few months, Ron cooks up a plan to get Todd out of the room. And this is how it goes down, based on Todd's story about what actually happened. One night, middle of the night, Todd wakes up. The blinds in the room have been pulled open, and it's light enough to see in the room. Ron is standing in the middle of the room, naked, painting a huge mural on the wall that has the door on it. As Ron moves from area to paint, he skips and quietly sings to himself. Ron also paints himself. Little paint for the wall, little paint for Ron. After 5+ minutes of watching this scene from his bed with growing disbelief and horror, Todd says something, and Ron turns slowly to face Todd, skips over to Todd's bed, kisses Todd full on the lips, and says, "Go back to sleep Todd, you're dreaming." Todd is just sleepy enough to find this somewhat convincing, so he rolls over. Also, what else is he going to do? Fight his naked, paint-covered roommate? The next morning, Todd wakes up, and there's no mural anywhere in the room. No paint on the floor, no paint on any of Ron's bedclothes, and Ron is fast asleep in his bed, wearing a t-shirt. Todd wakes Ron up and asks if anything odd was going on in their room last night. Ron replies that he had a chemical test that wiped him out, so he just came straight home and went to bed and had been asleep until Todd woke him up. So now Todd doesn't know what the fuck to think, but the best answer appears to be that he had a homoerotic dream about his roommate being a painting satyr. So Todd nopes the out of the dorm room and gets reassigned. It made no sense to the rest of us either, until much later, when we were having a beer in Ron's room. He asked us if we wanted to see something cool. Sure, we did. So he shut off all the lights and then turned on a lamp hidden near his bed with a black light. All of a sudden, a massive, glowing mural appeared on the wall with the door on it, and all over Ron's sheets and comforter, and Ron just started laughing his fool off. And that's how Ron got a room to himself.